Now we're going to be looking at the membership and the identity operators. And we're going to be starting with the membership operators. When we talk about membership operators, these are operators that we use to determine whether a value or group of values are inside of a sequence. Under membership operators, we have the in operator and we'll have the not in operator. I'm going to start by creating what we call a list. When we get to data structures, we're going to learn more about lists and other collections or sequences in Python. So let me call this nums is equal to, here I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we're going to be using the membership operator to determine whether a value is inside of our list. So we're going to have result is equal to, I can have 3 as a value, then I'll provide a membership operator in. Then I'll provide the collection or the sequence, and in this case, we're using nums. So I have nums. This expression is going to evaluate to a Boolean value, true or false. What we're trying to establish here is whether the value 3 is inside of the list. If 3 is inside the list, it is going to evaluate to true. If not, it's going to evaluate to false. And in this case, we have true because 3 is inside of the list. Now let's print result. And here we have true. Now let me change this to 1. 1 is inside of the nums, and so I'm going to get true as well. But if I put a value that is not in the list, I'm going to get false. So let me have 6, and we'll run it. And as you can see, we have false. Now let's look at the not in operator. This is the opposite of the in operator. And in this case, we'll have 6 in nums, which evaluated to false. And so I'm going to have not in. And we'll run it. So this time around, we're going to get true. What this means is that 6 is not in nums. Now let me put a value that is in nums. So let's change this to 4. And if I have 4 not in nums, of course, it is going to be a false because 4 is actually inside of the nums. Now you can see we have false as our output. Now let's look at the identity operators. So we'll have identity operators. These are operators that we use to establish whether two values or objects are the same thing. Under identity operators, we have 2 operators. Here we have the is operator and the is not operator. First, I'm going to be having this variable. Let me call it num1. And I'm going to be assigning it to a list. So we'll have 1, 2, and 3. Now I will have the second variable. This second variable, which is num2, is going to be assigned to num1. Then finally, I'm going to have another variable. This one is num3. And I'm going to assign it to 3, 4, and 5. Now I'm going to be using the identity operator to establish whether a given variable is the same thing as the other. So if I have result is equal to, and I have num1 is num2. So let's go ahead and print the result. Of course, we'll run the program, and as you can see, we have true. So let me start by commenting out this other print statement to make it clearer. So we'll run it again, and as you can see, we have true. What this means is that num1 is exactly the same thing as num2. Two of them are stored in the same location. They refer to the same location in the memory. When we talk about identity operators, we're not trying to establish whether they are equal to each other or whether they're equivalent to each other. We're trying to establish the fact that they are the same thing, they are the same object. This may not make much sense to you now, but when we get to list, we're going to learn a concept known as shallow and deep copy. By then, it is going to make more sense to you. So, but for now, I want you to know that when we talk about identity operators, we're not trying to establish whether they are equal to each other or equivalent. We're only trying to establish whether they are the same thing. Now, let's look at this. If I have result is equal to, this time around, I'm going to say num1 is num3. Now let me print out the result. And this time around, we're going to get a false because they are not the same thing. But if I change this to is not, and I run it, you're going to see true. So this is for the identity operators that are used to establish whether two values or objects are the same thing and not to check whether they are equivalent, because two objects may be equivalent to each other but not the same thing.